But you mentioned there you got deployed. Can you tell us what this was like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did month and a half deployment out to the Middle East. The C-17, this was back in 2017. So the C-17 was based in, and still is as far as I know, we had bases in Kuwait and Al Udeid. And so I was out in Al Udeid, spent 6 weeks there. Very different type of flying. Stateside, flying out of McGuire, we are still picking up missions and so when I got on with the Air Force, I was employed at the regional airline. So I went on military leave. Took 5 years of mil leave. That took me through all the training and then through kind of our spin up process where you come back and you're on orders and you get trained by the squadron in the real world mission stuff. And you did the schoolhouse stuff, you learn the basics, but this is how it works in the real world, which is always different. Same for the airlines too. You learn the schoolhouse stuff and then most of it translates over, but in the real world things are a little different. So did that. Once the training was done, you start picking up missions and training to fill your schedule. So I did 5 years total before I went back to the airline of 2 years or so of training and then 3 years of flying missions and this deployment and other stuff. So stateside, when you're flying these missions, um, same idea. We're still moving the same stuff. We're just starting stateside, going over to Europe, whether London, Germany, Spain, and then maybe drop some cargo, pick up some cargo, and then go down to Africa into the Middle East, and then back through Europe, and then back to the States. So generally, you're doing one long haul leg on the front and back end. You're getting 24 hours off somewhere in Europe, and then you're doing out and back more or less for the most part into Africa and then back, or the Middle East and back, or wherever they need, wherever the mission goes. That was kind of the bread and butter. There are a lot of missions went the other way too, east, west, north, south, go every direction. But our primary stuff was that direction. So you're very used to that kind of 3 day missions at least, if not 5 or 7, and then coming back home with a long leg. But here, being based in the Middle East where everything's going on, everything was out and backs. So all the flying we would do was, a leg into Iraq, Afghanistan, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, all over the Middle East, and then back. And so you're kind of home for lack of a better word, every night. Which, yeah, definitely a very different mentality to the reserve flying stateside, where you're, in hotels and flying missions and staying in different bases and all that. Um, but we were supporting, it's 2017, so still supporting pretty much everything going on out there. The majority of the missions were in and out of Iraq. Some mentioned Jordan. Syria was a hush hush topic then, as far as anyone knew we weren't there, but that's when we were starting to spin up all that stuff. Oman, Turkey, yeah, going all over and supporting the different efforts in different ways. Whether, you could be just hauling food and stuff, or, there are days we had, I think I sent the picture over to you, just a whole C-17 load of, 2,000 pound bombs, and you're dropping those off at the fighter guys up in uh, Jordan or wherever they were based, and taking care of them there. And so there was a lot of that, mission forward flying, which is awesome stuff,
Yeah.
and where you actually get to put all these tactics you learned in the schoolhouse. And to back up a little too, I went to a class called Katzmikok, which is, oh man, I'm gonna have to remember this now. It's a tactics school. I'm not even gonna try to remember now. It's been a few years since I've been there. Um, but went out to a tactics school, so you learn all about the defensive systems on aircraft, how they work, the offensive systems in play right now in different countries, how those work, how we counter them, how they're trying to counter us, and the back and forth. And then in the schoolhouse, you're also learning the tactics we use in the C-17 specifically to, stay as safe as we can, whether that's just stay high as long as possible and then drop like a rock, where we can use the thrust reversers in flight. So we'll stay as high as possible and then throw the thrust reversers out push the nose over, shove it down, and you see it's just straight dirt
Mhm.
in front of the plane. And you dive, and you've got this all planned out. We got books on, they've done all the testing on this is how fast you're going to descend, and this is how many miles you need. And based on this speed and this altitude, we're going to start it here so we can end at this altitude here and just, as quick as possible, as efficiently as possible, be at the airport we want to be, minimize the time we're in the weapons effective zone. So yeah, all those concepts you learned in training and you never use stateside, you finally get to use them and try them out and see how they work. And so a lot of the tactical approaches, tactical arrivals, tactical departures of we're going to descend as fast as we can, or we're going to climb out as fast as we can, as efficiently as we can. Mm-hmm. And then you're communicating with the different agencies. They're moving you around based on what's going on the ground, and air support they're using to support the troops on the ground. So things are constantly changing. A lot of dynamic flying, if you will. And then, so a lot of those missions, and then a handful of sitting Bravo alert, which was 5 days of on call. And man, that'll just never got called on Bravo. So sat on Bravo, you'd sit for 5 days, got to be ready anytime. And just, so some boring little stretches in there where you find ways to kill time. And we'll get to that later, but that's where I found time to work on the side business and, got a lot of exercise in. 24-hour food haul made that a little easier. But it was definitely a venture. Learned a ton about the aircraft, and it's incredible how quick and how much you learn about the aircraft when you're in those situations, because you don't use those tools too often. And we read the book and, we've got all the numbers, and you kind of practice them when you can on the local training missions of, all right, we're going to do a TAC arrival to a short field assault landing, which, when you're in the States and in the airspace, especially the Northeast, you can't be starting at 25,000 feet, 30-some thousand feet, putting the reverses out, diving 20,000 feet, and then adjusting from there. There's too much traffic, and air traffic control will lose their mind and say, absolutely not. You cannot do that. So you practice within the bounds, the boundaries you're in. And so you get to practice this stuff, but not on the stage of, being in a combat zone. And so very different mentality and very different mindset of just taking all that stuff you'd practiced and really getting to apply it, and then dig deeper into it and be like, oh, okay, we did this from 30,000 feet and it didn't work as well as I expected. So you learn the little nuances and you learn how to adjust, and you get really good at it doing it fast. And especially when there's the potential for a threat that, a real threat versus we're doing this for training and we know there's nothing going on. Mm-hmm. But great missions. We moved a lot of, other than the weapons, moved a lot of helicopters in and out of Iraq. That was a very common mission of pulling Black Hawks. Usually we take a crew in a helicopter to a deployment and then pull a crew in a helicopter out. Mm-hmm. Handful of, bearded guys in normal clothes, and I don't know where they went or who they were, but a lot of different stuff. Met a lot of people, went a lot of places. You get to definitely see a different side of the flying in the C-17.